based off of your experience working on the policy level, working with government for and other like private corporations and stuff, how do you think this stuff gets built? Like, part of me, I know that's a bit of a broad question, but part of me is also thinking about how like the constant shift of like difficulties passing legislation seem to kind of like promote this type of, okay, you have this wide sweeping legislation. We can't just pass a new legislation because Congress is not being a legislative body right now. So you make changes or you make new legislation by poking tons of holes. And these things kind of get built over time. Or what do you think? Or how does this get built in this kind of in the landscape?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, right now, I don't know. I mean, well, I'll say this. So one of the interesting things was, sometimes when you can recognize something's like good and an accomplishment and an achievement, but still have your issues with it. And mine was Biden's IRA. And my problem was he didn't really go to anybody like me and talk. I mean, I was not included in anything like that. And it may sound arrogant to say like I should be included in that, but I was writing for the Obama website, you know what I mean? Like the White House website. I am a person who's, like you said, I'm involved at the state and federal level. I do help drive policy. I have testified with bright pink hair in Maryland in front of then Governor O'Malley. That was a little bit surprised. I was like, oh, well, didn't know I was going to be doing that. But, I am one of those people. I've been cited in like Pennsylvania for when they make decisions about, the Public Utilities Commission. And so, yeah, they should have asked me and I would have gone over some of the problems with that. And now to your point about poking holes in things is big, sweeping, fantastic, accomplished, thing that is going to be riddled with problems, and nobody really understood it, or really outside of the folks who were sort of specialists in that, nobody got it. It was an amazing legislative achievement, and yet, you've got this problem where people just don't know why it's there or what it's doing for them or why they should care. And I know people always say things like, oh, we should get better at messaging. And other people say like, oh, people are just, idiots and it doesn't really matter what you say. Neither of those is completely true, right? I mean, there are people who some messaging will just not reach. And there are people who are really interested in something, but yeah, they look at it and they're like, where am I in this? And so that has been true. I'm going to say this about both the Obama and the Biden administrations were very technocratic and top down. And they're not particularly consensus driven. And that is both of them, Obama more, are interested in behavior science, social science, where it can be almost applied as a technology. So for example, they really privileged nudges and choice architecture, both of which are slightly creepy. And while they seem to give people a choice, they really are manipulative. When I was working again at ACEEE, one of my colleagues, who is a mathematician, she was like, isn't this creepy? And I was like, hell yeah, it's creepy. I'm not for this. Again, anthropologist. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not an economist. I'm not really interested in optimizing your McDonald's menu so you go for the profitable choice. That's what choice architecture does. Nudges are the same sort of thing. You do a lot of prompts and nudges and remind people. Deployed, again, appropriately with nuance, they can be wonderful, really helpful. A good example might be, you now see in hotels all the time, like maybe reuse your towel. If you're done with your towel, throw it on the floor, we'll change it out. There's a lot more information and options and that is 100% coming out of sustainable behavioral science discussions and policy building. They went to hotels and said, you're going to save money on water, on labor, if you just encourage people to use one towel less per stay, that type of thing. But in general, what you find a lot of times is something that's a little bit more technocratic, more manipulative, more invasive, speaking to people's subconscious. not really engaging with people as thinking individuals. And I'm not a fan of that. Not sure if I've answered your question or not, but that's kind of where I land.
Yeah, no, this makes total sense. The nudging reminds me of the stuff with from my days working in tech, where there's a lot of nudging. I mean, the tech can have a lot of that on apps and things like this. I guess, yeah. What does it look like to try to build this from? Because as an anthropologist, you are much more bottom up. You are much more try to understand what's going on from the ground and build effective ideas that make sense of what actual people are doing in their real lives. What does that look like to you, and how has it been interacting with people who might have a much more top-down mentality and trying to build something effective with them?
Well, I would say, so it's kind of funny because as I do talk at a lot of conferences and things, I've had some pretty interesting moments of engagement with people. One of which was somebody asking really huge question. I don't remember what it was, but it was just such a big question. And I was sort of like, well, get rid of capitalism? And people just erupted in applause and laughter, because it was sort of like, some of these things we really need to like go back to the basics and be like, late modern capitalism is pretty horrific, you know what I mean? And so, private equity buying everything and, piecing it out, parting it out and selling it, and people lose jobs and we lose, products that we like, and, communities lose employers, no bueno. So sometimes the answer is as simple as, revolution, to the second part of your question is fascinating. I've only really had one person get mad at anything, and it was, I'm trying to remember the context. It was 100% at Beck, and, I know what it was. It was a guy coming from one of the utilities, I want to say near Pittsburgh. He was very much a utility guy, and we call those OWUGs, old white utility guy. And so, welcome to our jargon, OWUG. And he just does not agree that qualitative research it has any validity whatsoever. And I was trying to explain to him the idea, first of all, that validity versus reliability. There's two different things going on when you're doing certain kinds of research. So, cultural anthropology is super valid. We're on the ground. It's empirical. It's data. It's right in front of your face. Like you said, it's actual people doing real things in their homes. We see it, we record it, and then we go home and we analyze it. That's empiricism. That's empirical. Well, he does not believe that. I don't know what he thinks happens there, but he did not agree with that at all. So I go, let's say I'm in the field, and this guy says, this guy named Fred is having an affair. So he's got two ladies, and there's drama in the community. And I'm there with my bag of popcorn, just watching this whole thing unfold, talking to his friends, talking to the wife, talking to the side chick, I get all the scoop, all the information, right? Does that mean I have the full story with quote truth? No, but it does mean that I have a lot of validity built into my reporting on the situation. I've been there. I've interviewed all of the people involved. I've interviewed people who are outside, inside. All these things. Can I recreate that? Can I go to the next field site and say, this guy named Fred, I want you to go start sleeping with another lady and see what happens so I can test my theory? No, I cannot do that. Qualitative ethnographic research is grounded, it's valid, but you can't replicate it. You can't recreate human beings doing the exact same thing, every single time. You and I have worked on surveys together, as you know, and there's a reason why most people do surveys very poorly. You and I do a great job. We really did. People do not understand how good we are. But getting a client to move past what we might call descriptive statistics, that's difficult. We've had problems with that. Well, OWUGs see numbers, and to them, numbers are just real in a way that human data is not real. And so I just said, the guy was not getting it. He was getting very red in the face. And he's just like, I just don't believe in any of that. And I was like, you're sitting here at the Behavior, Energy, and Climate Change Conference. I mean, literally everybody is here to talk about qualitative research. So good luck. And I do believe he left early. So that was an incident where I really had a guy who was just 100% not going to listen, not interested in learning, wanted to stick with his old way. And yeah, I felt a little bad because, I mean, I certainly didn't want him to go away. I wanted him to enjoy the conference. It's a conference dear to my heart, but I just can't be like, oh yeah, no, everything I do sucks. Yeah, and I'm wrong. You know, that's not going to happen. And I do think there's some sexism there too, by the way. I mean, to him, I look younger. He doesn't know my age, but, you know, like I said, he's an old white utility guy. I'm female, I'm small. You know, why am I sitting up there on the dais? You know, why am I authority? You know, shouldn't he be the authority because he's an old white utility guy who knows what he's talking about because he's worked for Pittsburgh Utility for 35 years? So I think there's some stuff that he needs to work out, you know, in his own life. And you know, people are like that. But that's one way in which I've encountered, you know, some anger and pushback about using qualitative research to talk about environmental things.
Yeah, this makes total sense. And I now, as a side, I'm waiting for the to read about the anthropologist who advocates, whose social research is go to a community and start an adult situation and just see what happens. That would be the very like
anthropologist who slept around and reported on it. I can definitely give you that for your show notes.
I have read that.
I definitely, yeah, that's not uncommon. I mean, to be honest, I mean, you know, I got pregnant during my field work, so what does that make me? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I got married and pregnant, but you know what I mean? Like, so, I mean, was that the same thing? I don't know, but
well, do you know who also did that speaking of presidents, was Obama's mother.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And she's an anthropologist, yes.
Yeah, she was an anthropologist, and I don't know what she was doing in Kenya. Maybe it was not field work. Maybe it was something else. But
I think her field work was in Asia for some reason, but I thought but yeah, I don't know what she was doing there either. But yeah, I mean, I'm married to German. Yeah. So, you know, but yeah, so yeah, that is funny though. I mean, Love Island anthropology, you know, like let's start that. That could be funny. Or throw in a random anthropologist to any of these shows. You know, just have an anthropologist show up on Bravo with like what's happening with Andy Cohen. You know, I think that could be.
My professor, my anthropology professor, actually studied some reality TV shows. Oh my gosh! But I don't think he was on set. I think he did some sort of like it. But it was, I think it was like Desperate Housewives. It was very class-based. But fun fact, you were actually the second interview that brought up Love Island. So I don't know what's going on with this TV show, but you were the second person who has independently brought it up.
I've never watched it. Ross and I have gotten into watching The Traitors with Alan Cumming set in Scotland. And there's a lot of reality TV show people on that, and we don't know who anybody is because we just don't watch any of that stuff. But we do watch Traitors. And so I have sort of a third way removed insight into that world and very limited. But yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. Okay, so maybe taking us back to what we were talking about before. I guess you were talking about, so you have the current stuff that's going on with the second Trump presidency, right? You before did a lot. You talked about doing a lot at the beginning of Trump's first presidency to help prepare the community. I was going to ask, how has this time around compared with the first time around? And then I'll have another question, another comparison in a second. Now that I'm still talking, I guess I'll say it now. I'm also curious as to how, like, obviously there are multiple Republican presidents and conservative presidents. How has he compared, like, that?
That's a great question, and I'm going to have to go back a little bit before I can fully answer that. And I'm going to start with saying that my dad was a Republican, and a smart guy, And he was really Republican. He said he cried in a bar in Utah when Nixon resigned. Like, apparently when I was about 4 or 5, I said to him, like, what's Watergate, Daddy? And he's like, it's a hotel. But my point about that is he was also like a conservationist. He definitely believed he liked to hunt, and his attitude was, there won't be anything to hunt if we don't take care of the natural world, my father-in-law is currently a Republican in Arizona, though, again, not a Trumper, and I think he voted for Kamala. That's at least what I heard through the grapevine. So, but my point being, he's a old school mining engineer dude, who hunts doves in the Arizona desert. And again, I think a lot of Republicans come out of that tradition, of hunting and fishing and respecting the natural world. They definitely, they want their cars. I mean, they have always been inimical to certain forms of environmental regulation, mostly because they make money from it not being regulated. But at least there's that tension between their heart and their enjoyment and understanding and connection to the natural world and the environment, and they usually have some sense of that. And I would say under Bush too. Of course, super hand in glove with the oil industry, no question, and Enron and all that jazz. But at the same time, I don't feel like they were really. They didn't try and destroy the EPA. I'm pretty sure that Nixon signed the EPA stuff. So
he did a lot of environmental legislation.
Oh yeah, calm down. Compared to what's going on, they all end up being weird though that way. Like my favorite is John Boehner. Remember John Boehner? Are you old enough to remember John Boehner? Because he was around not terribly long ago. He was the speaker, Republican, old school guy, liked to drink his wine, smoke his cigars. Apparently, Duke met with the Pope, and we don't know what happened. But he came out of that spiritually transformed, retired from Congress, and started some type of cannabis company. So they have some sort of tension there, I think, but not so much. So now we have Trump, and Trump believes nothing but Trump. Trump was a Democrat. Trump went to the Clintons' wedding. He's known all of these people. He's schmoozed all these people, but he's a hater. He's a hater, and he really just thinks that he likes destroying things that other people like because he is a malign narcissist. And so what's terrifying about this time, and also was last time, it's just we had more people holding him in check last time, is that you can't reason with a malign narcissist. You just can't. There's no persona in there to grasp that other people are real. That is the problem. The previous Trump administration, again, we weren't wrong. Everybody who sat down and said, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, all that stuff is happening now. The only reason it did not happen the last time was because we had people like his chief of staff, the General Milley, different people like that who really stood in. Dan Quayle, hero of the Republic, who knew? Dan Quayle is the one who convinced, Pence to not, go along with this unconstitutional coup. Dan Quayle, Mr. Potatoes, that we mocked, is the one who basically essentially helped save the Republic. So, we have, so I would say that it is really different because the person that they are all circling is very different. This person is like Asimov's the mule, although actually I think Elon Musk is the mule. I don't know which one's the mule, but it's a little bit like a John the Baptist Jesus situation. One of them's the Antichrist. One of them is the harbinger, the herald. These are crazy people, and they are criminals, and they do not believe in the Constitution. They do not share a set of cultural values. The previous administrations, for all of their flaws and faults, you can't say that Dick Cheney doesn't believe in the Constitution, because he does. You know what I mean? So I think that's the truly radical difference, is that we have a cult of personality currently running this country. And prior to that, we may have had oppositional parties, but they still had a framework in common. And that framework is Gonzville.
Yeah, this is the sad part. I think the other.
Yeah, this is the sad part.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's just there isn't. It's like the closest thing. It's like the second time around, it's more effective because the people are not in place to act as a brake.